Hello and welcome to the Global Reentry presentation today. This is our part of our weekly series of professional development topics, and we are thrilled to invite a couple of special guests from the Institute for Economics and Peace to present on their Positive Peace Academy and a workshop that we'll be offering to RPCVs the first week of December. We're just thrilled to invite Michael Collins and Jessica Duque to share a little bit more about this program. Michael is the Executive Director for the Americas for Institute for Economics and Peace, based in New York City. Jessica works closely with Michael as well, and they're both going to be presenting today. Would like to just kind of frame this conversation. You might have read this already, but so forgive me if this is redundant. But a notable member of our community provided this introduction that I think is good for those who are watching the recording and those participating live to just hear as we frame the conversation for today. For 60 years, the purpose of the Peace Corps has been to promote world peace and friendship, but the concept of peace promotion is rarely mentioned in training, service, or the close of service. However, during the same 60 years, a concept known as peace building has emerged to describe how peace can be achieved and to prescribe the special role each of us can play as private citizens, especially of those with Peace Corps experience and values. The Institute for Economics and Peace, IEP, and the Global Peace Index have become a key part of the peace building community and with significant impact worldwide. IEP has identified and analyzed the most peaceful countries in the world to help us understand the qualities and characteristics that enable them to thrive in peace, while too much of it is mired in violence. They have pioneered a positive peace framework that identifies the pillars of peace, the attitudes, structures, and institutions that enable societies and nations to live and thrive in peace. Peace Corps volunteers help develop the building blocks of peace, education, respect for others, low corruption, etc., in our communities during service. And we can all be peace builders throughout our lives. That was shared by Chick Dombach, who is a notable peace builder in our community. Not sure if Chick is joining today, but I know he's going to try to be a part of this throughout, and we owe it to Chick for helping create this relationship and introducing NPCA to Institute for Economics and Peace. And I'm really hopeful that this can be a burgeoning partnership with the Global Reentry program. So we'll see where this goes. I invite you to ask questions throughout in chat. We'll monitor those and make sure we feed them to Michael and Jessica, and hopefully have some time for Q&A at the end. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Jan. I'm just going to make a couple of remarks before passing it on to Michael, who will be giving the main part of the presentation today. But I would just want to thank you again and the whole team for kind of helping us create this initiative. We're super excited to be partnering with NPCA and the Global Reentry program. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, the Institute for Economics and Peace, IEP, we are an independent nonprofit think tank dedicated to building a greater understanding of the key drivers of peace, as well as the economic benefits that increased peacefulness can deliver. So we're a think tank that is headquartered in Sydney, Australia. We were founded by the tech entrepreneur, Steve Killalay, and both, as Dan mentioned, both Michael and I are coming to you from our New York office. So IEP itself, we kind of specialize in producing global indices, as Dan mentioned. So we're known for our flagship report, the Global Peace Index, as well as other reports that we produce, such as the Global Terrorism Index and country-level reports like the Mexico Peace Index. And although we are primarily a research institution, one way we do try to utilize our research is by turning it into tools and frameworks that can be used for peace education and community action. So that idea of peace education and community action is kind of what this presentation today will be focused on, and how we use one of our core research areas, positive peace, as a framework to develop peace building projects. And so with that, I'll pass it on to Michael.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And Dan, I do see that Chick is with us today. Chick, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here. And thank you very much to your written contribution in preparation for this presentation, which Dan actually just read. I'm not sure if you caught the tail end of that. But it actually fitted in very well with essentially what is sort of the first slide here. And that is that question about what is peace building. And it's a great place to start, right? The definition of peace building. And, you know, Peace Corps has already, and Peace Corps volunteers, an incredibly comprehensive understanding, or a broad kind of sort of understanding of what peace building is. But oftentimes when we think about peace building, we automatically kind of sort of gravitate towards thinking about the countries most in conflict, right? The least peaceful nations on earth. And when we think about peace building, we think perhaps about, you know, negotiating a peace settlement, right? Or some kind of sort of form of mediation, or some form of kind of sort of reconciliation. Now, you know, sort of the studying of conflict is definitely something that can be useful, but we feel in many ways that it leaves, or it only presents half of the picture, right? And that there is value in studying the most peaceful nations. So there's a sort of a couple of analogies that we like to use. Number one, would you only, for example, study disease or sick people if you wanted to know what led to a healthy and long life? Or alternatively, you know, would you only study darkness if you wanted to know about the properties of light? So, you know, the field of peace building in itself is actually relatively new. It's only been around for sort of 50, 60 years. And even today, you know, we tend to focus very much on the study of conflict rather than the study of peace. And oftentimes we tend to sort of overimpose our moral values or our philosophical values, which invariably are very different around the world. So we think that there's definitely a lot of potential and a lot of need for a more quantitative understanding of peace. So as Jessica mentioned, what we are dedicated to primarily is to shifting the world's focus to peace as a positive, tangible, and achievable measure of human well-being and progress. Sort of in a nutshell, the work of the Institute tries to essentially answer these two questions. Number one, what are the most peaceful countries on earth? And then number two, what is it that they have in common, right? The idea is if we can, you know, if we understand what these traits are, the more likely it is that we can sort of replicate these traits in our own countries. Now, these two questions actually hold a lot of parallels with two terms that you may already be familiar with, but are talked about a lot in sort of the peace building sector. And that is sort of the term of negative and positive peace. So negative peace refers, as you can see here, to the absence of violence or fear of violence. It's kind of like a sort of a relatively simple metric, and it's you know, relatively well established or understood. Basically, if people aren't killed, if there are low levels of violence, then a country or a community has high levels of positive peace. And we say negative peace because it's the absence of something, essentially, right? That's a useful metric. But positive peace is something more rich. It's something more complex. It refers to the attitudes and the institutions and structures that create and sustain peaceful societies. It's the answer to the question, what peaceful societies have in common, whereas negative peace is the answer to the question, what are the most peaceful countries on earth, for example. And if you'll allow me to kind of sort of extend the analogy just a little bit, negative peace is the equivalent, for example, of having a good blood pressure, whereas positive peace is the equivalent of sleeping lots, eating healthy, and trying to find ways to reduce stress, for example. So what I'm going to share with you are sort of the general processes that IEP follows to be able to establish and measure these two elements there. And then I'm going to share examples of how that information or that research or the frameworks that stem from that can be used to be able to build positive peace in a community setting. Now, in terms of measuring negative peace, right, the absence of violence or fear of violence around the world, Jessica noted the Global Peace Index, which is sort of our flagship product. Now, we've been doing it for around 15 years now, and what it does is it ranks 163 countries based on their level of peacefulness. Now, we use a variety of different sort of indicators for that. They're relatively simple. So things, for example, related to the number of battle deaths in a particular country, or the number of homicides, or the impact from terrorism, or even things like incarceration rates, are all symptomatic of either low levels or high levels of peacefulness, right? Even things like militarization, a level of militarization in society, is symptomatic of whether that society is peaceful or not. So with that in mind, and given the experience of the group, and this little red dot here on the bottom left-hand side is a reminder to me to ask you, what do you think are some of the most peaceful societies on Earth? What are the most peaceful countries on Earth? How about we spend the next 30 seconds or so, 30 seconds to a minute, writing some of these potential answers in the chat box and sharing them with each other? What do you think? Excellent. So Kathleen, you proposed Japan. Dan came in straight away with Scandinavian countries. Didn't want to commit to a particular country. Dan, he thought he'd remain pretty broad. A lot of people tend towards the Nordic countries, and for good reason, of course. Cameron talking about Scandinavian countries, Bhutan, Denmark, Rwanda, Costa Rica. Excellent. Fiji, very good. Malawi, wonderful. And you could kind of sort of do this at a global level, or you could focus down regionally as well, right? And say which is sort of a most peaceful country within a particular region. Costa Rica, for example, according to our measures, is the most peaceful country in the Americas. Switzerland, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for your thoughts, and we'll kind of sort of reveal, if you will, sort of what we would consider them to be based on our sort of research and our analysis. In fact, I think they're coming up next. So drum roll, here we have them. These in 2020 are the top 10 most peaceful countries based on the Global Peace Index. So we have countries like Iceland, which has in fact been the most peaceful country since the inception of the index, and then a number of the other countries that you mentioned here, including Denmark, including Switzerland. The Nordic countries and the Scandinavian countries, other than Denmark, do rank generally very high on the Global Peace Index. It happens this year that the rest would be slightly underneath the top 10. So this is kind of sort of an example, I suppose you could say, of some of the results, the immediate results that we come up with. But equally, you could look at the very bottom of that table, the list of 163 countries, and you could sort of, find the least peaceful countries on Earth. And as you can see, the least peaceful country right now is Afghanistan. But take a moment to look at the difference between these two lists, right? Remember when we were talking about peace building and whether we're fixating on countries in conflict versus country in peace? Think how different the study is when we sort of, study these countries versus when we study these countries, for example. In one thing, we're kind of sort of looking for something that isn't there. In the other case, we're actually looking at things that are there, allowing us to be able to study them in more detail. So let's get into that a tiny bit. But just before I do, in terms of the information that comes out of this reporting, you can go on IEP's website and you can click on any individual country that you may have been working in as part of your Peace Corps experience, or perhaps a country that you're returning to, or even a country in which you're living right now. And you can click on it and you can see where it is in terms of levels of peacefulness worldwide. The report also kind of sort of provides global information about how, as a humanity, we are doing in terms of peacefulness in comparison to previous years. It tells us which countries are becoming more peaceful, less peaceful. Not only does it say which are the most peaceful countries, but also which are the ones most improving in peace over time, which can also be very helpful. And you can also do it sort of regionally as well. And also it allows you to actually break it down by particular indicator or by particular theme as well. So, in that sense, it can really provide a sort of a detailed picture of things that are going wrong, perhaps, or indicators that are deteriorating, or indicators that are improving as well. So there's a whole wealth of information that is there that is critical, right, to be able to sort of develop a baseline measure of peacefulness around the world. But as we noted before, this is really only half of the picture. If we sort of start from the fact or the idea that the perfect state would have no jails and no homicide and no need even for a police force for that matter, right? We then come to a country with high levels of negative peace, right? The lower the levels of homicide, the less violent crime, fewer military interventions, the higher the levels of peacefulness. That is in fact what we track through this product that we call the Global Peace Index. Now, how does positive peace come? Well, the good thing is we've already been able to answer the first part of the question, right? Which is, what are the most peaceful countries on earth? This enables us to then be able to dedicate ourselves to studying those countries to see what they have in common. And the way that we've gone about that essentially is to take the results from the Global Peace Index, think of it as a sort of a list on Rotten, a film list on Rotten Tomatoes, right? In terms of most peaceful to least peaceful. And then we are able to compare that or to cross-reference that with thousands and thousands of socioeconomic and cultural and attitudinal data sets to see which are those underlying elements or indicators that most closely correlate with ups and downs in subsequent levels of ups and downs in peacefulness. So when one thing improves on one end, that then leads to an improvement in the other. So that enabled us to be able to identify 400 specific indicators of positive peace, right? Things that enable us to be able to predict, to a certain extent, of course, future drops or improvements in peacefulness over time. So let's ask the second part of the second question here. Based on those list of countries, for example, the top 10 or other peaceful countries that you're familiar with, what would you say are some of the characteristics of the most peaceful nations on earth? Let's take another 30 seconds, 1 minute to brainstorm some general ideas about what are the traits of the most peaceful countries on earth. Great, we have some wealth. Yeah, I mean, I'm laughing, but it's economic stability, investments in education and economic safety nets, shared values, lifespan, investments in human capital. It's amazing actually when we sort of think about it, especially when it's multiple people, the various ideas and the great variety of ideas that kind of sort of come up from all of these different angles. And I think that that's one of the most critical findings that we're gonna be touching on. Access to healthcare, military budget, very interesting, Rachel. I'd be very interested to ask you about that. Anti-gun legislation, globalist ideas, live and let live. Yeah, the golden rule, right? Very, very kind of sort of, they can be either very detailed or technical metrics, but there can also be broad ones. Economic and stable government, excellent. So given levels of participation, I'm assuming that you would like to see how we have kind of sort of measured that ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I think that most, if not all of you, have completely hit the mark here, right? When we look at what it is that the most peaceful countries on earth have in common, we can actually put those 400 indicators into 8 buckets, which we call the 8 pillars of positive peace. And they're as follows. The most peaceful countries on earth have a well-functioning government. They ensure rule of law, they provide the adequate provision of basic public services and the peaceful transition of power, for example. They have an equitable distribution of resources in terms of equitable access to education and healthcare, for example. They have a free flow of information in terms of people's access to information, but also the quality of the information that they receive. They have good relations with neighbors in the case of a nation state, neighbors with, relations with neighboring countries. They have high levels of human capital, which somebody noted specifically in the answers there, in terms of a well-trained, employed and productive workforce, for example. They have an acceptance of the rights of others, whether that be in terms of gender, of race, of ethnicity, of sexuality, of religion, etc. They have low levels of corruption or perceived low levels of corruption. They have a sound business environment, and that can be for large companies, small companies, formal or informal, and it relates largely to the ability for companies to be able to grow and to innovate. So one of the interesting things is that when we see when we have a look at these countries, especially countries that are improving in these particular metrics, that they benefit from a variety of other things as well. So for example, they benefit from higher per capita income. They benefit from high levels of resilience to natural disasters, but also things such as COVID-19, for example. Why? Because they have all of these different pieces in place to be able to sort of deal with a variety of kinds, with a large variety of crisis, if you will, right? Think of it as sort of an octopus, if you will, with multiple tentacles. It's the first time I've made that analogy. I think it's a terrible one. Think of they have better environmental outcomes. They have higher measures of well-being as well, and they even perform better on things like the Sustainable Development Goals too. Now, when we kind of sort of scratch under the surface of that, and when we sort of look at the data and how all of these things or these different pillars interact, there are some pretty sort of fascinating things that start to happen. Number one, we see, for example, a positive peace is systemic in nature. What does that mean? Well, in a nutshell, you really can't have an impact on one pillar at a societal level without having an impact on the others too, whether that be positive or whether that be negative for that matter. When we see countries or communities that improve most in peacefulness, we see that they do it by making small improvements to all pillars simultaneously, as opposed to making a very large shift in one particular pillar, which often actually leads to conflict. The second thing that we see is that positive peace as a sort of a concept or something that you build in a society is something that's slow moving, right? It takes time, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to move the whole system. That's unfortunate because we're all looking for a silver bullet, of course, but the good news is that it's also self-reinforcing, that as a country is becoming, a country's levels of positive peace are rising, right? It's becoming more peaceful. It becomes easier and easier to do. The bad news is that if levels of positive peace are deteriorating, it becomes more and more difficult to do as well. And that's why so many countries get caught in the violence trap, for example. The next thing is that they're contextual. What do I mean by that? A well-functioning government doesn't necessarily mean the same in one place as it does in the other. All of you have been exposed to, very different societies, very different cultural norms, and there needs to be an overlapping between the interpretation or the understanding of what this means at a local level, right, and that particular culture, that particular context as well, right? So what we think of as a well-functioning government may be completely different to what somebody thinks of in Cambodia, in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Paraguay, in Ukraine, etc., etc. And then the last thing, and perhaps this is where we sort of start to get to the real kind of sort of nut in the issue in terms of how we can begin to think about applying this framework in a peace building setting, is the fact that positive peace is interlinked. Now, what do I mean by that? So IEP, for example, we study these levels of positive peace at the nation state level, right? But remember, we talked about nations having good relations with neighbors. So one country's high levels of positive peace are in many ways contagious to the international community. As you build positive peace in a country, it extends progressively to the international community. And you could even say that over time, it could extend to the whole planet. And it does. Systems aren't really isolated. Everything is kind of sort of connected in that way. Now, of course, the larger the system, the more moving parts you have. So potentially the more complex it is. But you could also go the other way. And you could say inside a nation, there are multiple different systems, whether that be a community, whether that be an organization, or whether that be an individual project, right? Small systems interact with large systems and vice versa. Now, the key takeaway here from my perspective, and I hope yours, is that it means that if you are capable of building positive peace at a local level, not only are you doing it at a local level, but over the long term, you can actually build positive peace at a national, international, and global level as well, just through your local actions. So the next thing I'd like to do is just provide you a couple of examples of how we could potentially go about applying these key research findings in an actual project, perhaps very similar to the one that you have or had been working on during your Peace Corps service. Here's an example of somebody who applied the Positive Peace Framework in an educational project. This was a literacy project in Uganda. They've been trying to improve literacy levels for a number of years with very limited success. After attending a similar workshop to the one that we're proposing in December, they decided to use the framework to evaluate their situation and to actually shift or enhance the objective of their project from improving student conditions, enrollment rates, and academic performance to do the same, but in this case, by building positive peace in and around the school system. Now, what does this mean? Let me give you a couple of examples. So, for example, if we take it on a sort of a pillar by pillar basis, in terms of well-functioning government, that reflection enabled them to be able to see that they hadn't really been incorporating certain elements inside that particular community, and a broader set of communities were included in the planning and implementation committee of the project. So as you can see, well-functioning government can not only mean different things, but we're also talking about governments at kind of sort of different levels. In this case, we're talking about governance within the school itself. In terms of a sound business environment, one of the things that they realized was they really weren't leveraging enough the local businesses in terms of the work that they had been doing and the work that they were planning to do. So they ensured that they brought in and utilized to the best of their ability local contractors and local materials. You know, for many of you, this will sound like a no-brainer, but you'd actually be surprised in terms of very large international development projects, how often materials are imported or the local skills aren't taken advantage of, to the detriment of everybody. In terms of equitable distribution of resources, they actually shifted the distribution patterns of scholastic materials inside the classrooms. They had sort of been focusing on those students most in need for a very small amount of changing cost. They actually decided to basically provide the same sort of scholastic materials for everybody, which in this particular context helped reduce jealousy and conflict between students. The acceptance of the rights of others pillar came to bear in an interesting way. And when they were kind of sort of looking for connections to this pillar, one of the things that they identified is the relatively regular drop in attendance of girls at school on a monthly basis. And they realized that this was attached to the fact that a number of the girls not only didn't have access to sanitary pads, but also were subject to stigmatization. So the school actually took it upon themselves to provide regular sanitary pads, to provide hygiene training, and through that, girl attendance was able to significantly increase. Good relations with neighbors, one of the challenges that they were having is that the students would go and steal fruits and vegetables from the local farmers, and they decided to plant fruit trees to be able to sort of reduce the amount of pilfering going on. Free flow of information, they partnered with a radio station to be able to share news about the project, and to be able to share local news more broadly with the community. High levels of human capital, they decided to increase the number of medical checks and meals to be able to kind of sort of augment a student's attention span in the afternoon, for example. And in terms of low levels of corruption, that they decided to make adjustments to the transparency and accountability of the project. The actual result of this was phenomenal. I mean, as you can see here, over a 2 to 3 year period, there was significant increase in pupil enrollment, and more importantly, pupil performance significantly increased as well. And in many ways, it's that shift in mentality from what was a very single focus to the broader needs of the community. Now, IEP can take absolutely no credit for this whatsoever. It certainly wasn't my project. It was a Rotary project, but the framework was nonetheless useful to be able to identify things that perhaps people hadn't thought of in the beginning, that just by reflecting through the various pillars can kind of sort of come to bear. Now, I'm going to share just one more quick example, and I realize I'm probably getting to the end of my time here. But I just want to kind of expand that ring of an onion, if you will, and just sort of bring it to a whole community level. And this is an example of a community in Kansas City here in the United States, a community that had been subject to a lot of gun violence, that has had significant improvements in peacefulness over the last 3 or 4 years. IEP had nothing to do with this. I have to confess that I actually found out about this project on the internet, but I thought it represented beautifully the systemic thinking that we can go through in terms of developing community projects. So, for example, in terms of a well-functioning government, one of the things that I noticed is that they had put in place a very, very strong neighborhood council of people who had been born inside the neighborhood and were very, very well respected. The second thing is that they held frequent community events, they had picnics, they had cleanups, they constructed playgrounds, and they had kind of really strengthened liaisons with the police. The police participated directly in a lot of these activities to be able to improve levels of trust. In terms of a sound business environment, I saw that they're creating spaces and opportunities for small entrepreneurs as well as for larger housing redevelopment projects as well. Their website has got a lot of information, and they all meet on a very regular basis to share issues, concerns, ideas throughout the community. There's this sort of cradle to college education pipeline. So they pay a lot of attention to the transition between primary, secondary, and college, and other things like demonstration gardens, for example, which not only sort of provide more healthy food in the community, but also provide entrepreneurial opportunities as well. So as you can see, all of these pillars interconnect between each other. Equitable distribution of resources, a specific action group dedicated to improving equity. Lower levels of corruption, they developed a neighborhood watch program to be able to sort of take on some of the elements that couldn't be directly tackled by police. And the overall theme of the project was in support of acceptance of the rights of others, specifically a focus on racial equity. So this is kind of sort of one level up at the community. And you could take this, and we have a number of examples of kind of sort of larger and larger projects as you go. In a nutshell, we propose the positive peace framework as a tool that would enable any peace builder, whether it's prior, during, or after Peace Corps service, to be able to identify new ways of building peace. My hope is that we've been able to kind of sort of broaden the definition of peace building. We've only really sort of scratched the surface of this. And this is one of the reasons why we'd like to invite you to the positive peace workshops we'll be doing in December that Jessica will be telling you more about. Alternatively, I may have just confused the hell out of you, in which case I think it's probably very good that at this stage we stop and open it up for discussions and for any questions that you may have.
Michael, this is Steve Warner in Denver, and so I'm interested in the workshops, and some of other Denver friends are on this call today, but is the goal for us to take this information and expand it through, say, Rotary clubs, RPCV groups, and other groups that are interested in peace building? Are you looking at us to be the frontline activists to expand the circle, so to speak?
The short answer, Stephen, is of course, yes, absolutely, that is super welcome. But we also want to have a very tailored approach. We would like to the extent that we can, share those tools with you and empower each and every one of you to be able to have, you know, maximum impact on the future. I think I'm answering a question that will perhaps be best answered by Jessica. Jessica, could I open it up to you?
Yes, thank you, Michael. So the next kind of part of our presentation is going to be discussing the workshop. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so thank you, Michael, for that really great presentation. And so if you found an interest in positive peace, in the Global Peace Index and its findings, in systems thinking and in peace building, not only that, but as Stephen mentioned, if you kind of have an interest in planning a holistic project similar to the case studies that Michael had mentioned, this next bit is sort of our pitch to you and about the workshop that's going to be happening in December. So we'll be hosting a 3-session positive peace workshop in which you'll be able to utilize the 8 pillars of positive peace to your own work and to your community. So whereas this kind of format was a little bit lecture oriented, the positive peace workshop will kind of open it up. And we'll work with you individually through discussion activities and really help you kind of explore your own peace building work. So what does that actually mean? We'd like to think of it in 2 objectives. So first, we really want to help you bring that peace building lens to any development or community projects. And as Michael mentioned, you know, we are kind of talking about projects at any scale. One thing that we hope you took away from the presentation is that the pillars of positive peace can really be applied in any context, from the country level to the community level, at the same time, from very large development projects to very small local community service projects. So hopefully by taking the workshop, you'll be able to have some of the tools that we'll be able to provide to kind of articulate the peace building impact that it can exist within a specific program. And second, as kind of a fun but hopefully very valuable activity, since we are, partnering with NPCA on this workshop, we want to be able to give you the space to reflect on your own Peace Corps experience and the work that you did. Looking at the ways you were able to build positive peace during your service. And again, using the tools that we'll discuss in the workshop to be able to articulate that specific peace building impact. So I'm going to pause for questions here. In total, we will have 3 sessions. So it's going to be 6 hours of online training, and we will provide participants with certificates. The next slide, I'm going to go into a little bit more logistics about key dates and such, but I'll pause here for any questions about the content of the workshop specifically.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is this the workshop that is offered regularly, or is it new? Is it only being offered in December?
So, Michael, do you want to answer that question? Because I think we can kind of share examples of maybe previous workshops that we've given as well.
Yeah, Denise, I'm not sure when you say regularly, I'm not sure. Do you mean that there is already a series of workshops at NPCA that I'm not sure exactly, to be honest with you, how that fits. Go ahead.
I am interested in other workshops, but for this one in particularly, if for some reason the December dates don't work for us, will this workshop be offered again in the future?
So the short answer, the short of it, Denise, is yes, absolutely. In fact, in an ideal, this is in some ways, and I'm sure that Dan wouldn't mind me sharing this. This is in some ways a pilot. We think that there is a distinct opportunity to be able to, number one, significantly promote the peace building impact that Peace Corps already has as an entity, and the peace building impact that every Peace Corps volunteer has. And then secondly, be able to actually enhance both the organization and the experience to be able to strengthen the peace building capacity as well. So the short answer is, should this workshop be successful, we would love to be able to expand that, and ideally, be able to open it up to people on their way to service, to be able to have that additional tool in their back pocket that we hope may be of use.
Thank you very much. And I am very interested. I'm gonna see if I can't make the December workshop work out.
Thank you, Denise. Dan, I saw your question in the chat. Just to kind of give context for Dan's question, which was about positive peace ambassadors. So we do have multiple programs similar to this at IEP. We have our IEP Ambassadors program, which is a global program in which participants do 3 90-minute webinars with us that kind of does something similar to the presentation that we have today. We also do have a strategic partnership with Rotary International, in which we train Rotarians in positive peace. This program is similar, but very much tailored to NPCA and the Peace Corps experience. So we are going to use, the positive peace framework. Whereas with the ambassadors program, we are, kind of speaking generally to appeal to our global audiences. This one is going to be a lot more intimate and tailored specifically to the Peace Corps experience. Hopefully that answered the question. And then I see in the chat, Stephen mentioned some of the tools that we'll be using. So we do have a couple of pieces of literature on our website about the positive peace framework, and we will be using some of those tools there, such as the positive peace implementation guide. But as I mentioned, since this is kind of a, so to speak, exclusive workshop with NPCA and IEP, a lot of the workshop will actually be new content created specifically for the RPCV experience.
Jessica, just quickly, I want to highlight what Chick is saying, that for NPCA is also very important that we look at this through the work that our affiliate groups are doing, and to provide this as an ongoing opportunity for affiliate groups, especially those who are running small grants programs and who have social impact projects as part of their missions. I think this is a great framework that they can look at, and that we are looking at NPCA within our community fund, for example. So if there are people who go through this workshop and they're looking for some limited resources to help with the implementation of a positive peace project, or to scale a project in that direction, we're eager to look at our community fund as a resource for that. And I was just going to say spot on, Michael, about this being a resource for volunteers before they deploy. Especially since we're not going to be having new RPCVs for a couple of years at the earliest at this point, because of the current hiatus of Peace Corps overseas. I think it's a great opportunity to work with those who are waiting to deploy, and to help give them a framework to the type of work that they're going to be stepping into as Peace Corps volunteers. And I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry.
No, thank you so much, Dan. Any further questions before I move on? Okay, great. So in terms of kind of key dates, as I mentioned, the workshop will be held in December, the week of December 6th. So the session is going to be held from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to hopefully accommodate those of you who may be working full-time or going to school. These sessions will also be recorded, but we do encourage participants to attend kind of all sessions, because they're mostly going to be driven by discussion. So in the chat, I'll drop the Google form link to sign up for the workshop. And the deadline to sign up is Friday, November 12th. So as kind of a prerequisite to the workshop, we ask that you complete the Positive Peace Academy, which is an IEP online course that goes a little bit deeper into the research products that we have. In the next slide, I'll go a little bit deeper into that part of the workshop, the Positive Peace Academy. But for these 3 sessions themselves, the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday one, the first session is really focused on, unpacking those 8 pillars of positive peace that Michael introduced, but exploring how the framework can be used in different elements of context analysis and community assessment. And then the following 2 sessions will be focused on that project design and execution. So looking at the communities that you work in, or the projects that you're interested in carrying out. We're going to be helping you build comprehensive plans to outline those, the project itself. Michael, did you have anything to add on the sessions?
No, that sounds great, Jessica. I mean, one of the things that we ask in sort of the registration is we ask for anybody who would be interested in joining to come with some form of project idea in mind, right? So that we can sort of go from the conceptual to the practical. Now, some of you may already be involved professionally in peace building projects, whether that is at home or abroad, potentially in the country where you had previously been working. Some of you may, have the very broad outline of a project, or alternatively, you may have a very good understanding of a local community, but you are looking for ways in which you can have an impact. All of those things are valid in terms of it being represented as in terms of it being sort of considered a project. But it would be very good, once again, to have, kind of sort of a tangible thing in your head that you could then, or that we could then jointly help unpack through the framework.
Great, thanks so much, Michael. So in regards to the Positive Peace Academy, I will also share a link to that in the chat box. It's also available on this form. As mentioned, it is IEP's online course in all of our research products. So the different kind of modules give you an overview of the Global Peace Index, the Positive Peace Index, as well as some of our other reports like the Global Terrorism Index and our Ecological Threat Register for those of you who may be interested in issues related to climate change. And so we ask workshops participants to complete this because it really helps lay the foundation for when we go into discussion in terms of the theory and the frameworks we'll discuss. So you're happy to complete it at your own pace. Like I said, there are just 5 simple modules. It takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours total. So you're happy to do, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, or if you find yourself, just being able to kind of get it all through in one sitting, that would be great. So the Positive Peace Academy itself, there is a certificate at the end of the course for those who complete it. And the certificate that you'll receive for the workshop in its entirety will include recognition that you completed the Positive Peace Academy. But for anyone else on this call, I mean, you're more than happy to share the Academy with friends if you think they would be interested in the research, whether they be an RPCV or not. It is a free online peace education resource. And as I mentioned, it kind of does expand on all of the research products that IEP has going on. Any questions related to the Positive Peace Academy? Let me check the chat real quick. Okay, Dan, did I miss any questions?
Just do we have a limit for the December workshop? I don't know, can't remember if we had set a cap on that yet.
Nope, no cap so far. I mean, given the size of today's meeting today, if everyone signed up, I think that would be really great as well. And that's definitely something we'll take a look at as kind of applications come in.
Yeah, I think if it gets beyond 50, that gets a little bit unwieldy from a facilitation perspective if we want it to be interactive, but that's just a best guess at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Dan. Okay. So the next bit, I'm going to walk you through one of the questions that's included in the sign-up form, and it kind of expands on what Michael mentioned earlier in terms of the project that you would like to, so to speak, bring to the table at the workshop. So one thing that I will highlight is that this workshop is very much focused on outcomes and calls to action. And so one thing we'd like for you to walk away with is just feeling empowered to execute a project. So Michael mentioned the Uganda example and the Kansas City example. Other examples I'll bring is that in the past, people have used the workshop to work on projects for their social entrepreneurship, for a study that they may be doing during graduate school, or as part of, as mentioned, a volunteer service project through Rotary or through clubs or memberships that you're part of. So really, I encourage you to answer this question as best as you can. The main bit of the reason why we're asking this question is because we're really interested in the areas of focus that you're passionate about. And so, based on the application and who kind of participates, that's really how we'll be tailoring the programming, making it unique to you and making it unique to your experience. So I'm gonna stop there. That was my last slide. I'm gonna pass it back to you, Dan.
Just to quickly point out Stephen's message on Rotary and the official NPCA affiliate group, the Partnering for Peace group, which is helping to strengthen the relationship between Rotary and Peace Corps. I think that there's a very strong potential for a 3 or 4-way partnership here between IEP and Peace Corps, NPCA and Rotary that Partnering for Peace can certainly help play a big part in. Really excited to see where that goes. And yeah, I also wanted to just give you the opportunity to weigh in as kind of the impetus of all this. If you wanted to unmute yourself and say anything, no pressure. If you say hello. If not.
Sure, I'll just want to say hello and tell you how pleased I am to see this happen. It's been a passion of mine for a long time to see the Peace Corps community connect with the whole peace building community. Just a quick aside on that. The term and the concept of peace building didn't exist when the Peace Corps was created. I think if it was out there, if we had this information when the Peace Corps was created, the Peace Corps would have linked up with this from the beginning. It would have just been a natural to have it be a part of it. But the Peace Corps proceeded doing what it was doing, and this developed in parallel with it, and the two never really connected. And what I've been trying to do is connect them. And I think I'm just so pleased to see that connection start to take place and develop. And anything I can do to help it progress, I will do.
Thanks so much, Chick, again for the introduction and for leading the charge. We're as part of the Peace Corps Connect to the Future work that hopefully many of you were aware of happened last summer, early in the pandemic. We held a number of town halls, and many of the hundreds of members of our community weighed in on what they hope to see for Peace Corps in the future, in the post-pandemic. And that resulted in a report that Chick helped spearhead, taking all of the input that we got and formulating the input into a report on recommendations to Peace Corps. And as we've worked on the implementation of those recommendations, it's very clear that a strong one is pushing pushing Peace Corps in the direction of doing more peace building. Back over to you, Michael and Jessica. I think we're just kind of in Q&A phase now, right?
Yeah, Michael, any additional thoughts? I'm just monitoring the chat as we speak.
No, I think, very happy to continue answering any form of question for the group, any concerns or any questions related to the research. But one thing that's kind of sort of sticking in the back of my mind still is this project. And we sort of talked about literacy, and we talked about economic development, or we talked about this, that, and on one side, especially given the examples that we developed, that we sort of shared today, a number of us, including myself, don't necessarily have the capacity to undertake a literacy program or project in a school, let alone something at community level as well. And something that came to mind when I was thinking about that is an IEP ambassador who did sort of a positive peace project that consisted of actually doing walking around the neighborhood delivering mail with sort of informational leaflets on a regular basis around a variety of different topics, and that analysis of the topics that she would write in sort of this informal newsletter for the neighborhood was based around her analysis using the positive peace framework. So she would develop her own newsletter. She'd print it out on the cheapest kind of paper, and it would be sort of news or information that you get in your inbox that would be relevant to the 8 pillars of positive peace, providing and establishing all of those keen connections to the different pillars. So I just wanted to sort of bring that up as kind of the example of a project that's actually very, very small, that costs very, very little, that nonetheless you can sort of bring or look at through the lens of positive peace and enhance in a way that that leads to a stronger peace building impact over time. So in other words, don't feel intimidated, don't feel like you need to bring a large project. We hope that we've kind of sort of made for the case that the framework is applicable at any level. Now, if anybody is working on issues of global governance, we can talk about that too, for sure.
Dan, has the link to the sign-up form been shared? In addition to, we'll also email you the sign-up form itself using the registration form, as well as the slides that both Michael and I used in today's presentation, and a couple of other resources that might help those who are interested in participating kind of prepare.
No, it has not been shared. If we could drop it into the chat here, that'd be great. As far as next steps, what I propose is that we email everyone who registered for this an email with a couple of things: the recording of the session that you can share with your groups and RPCV friends, the slides that Michael and Jessica said that they'd be willing to share, and the registration form. I can also even throw in some just language that you can easily forward the email to explaining what this is about to your group members.
Hi, this is Steve from Denver, and if I missed it, Brian asked a question that I'd like to, in the chat window, that I'd like to know about too. About, can we involve other partners, local partners?
It's a good question, Brian, and thanks for pointing that out, Stephen. I think for the purposes of the December workshop, we'd like to keep it to RPCVs. From what I'm hearing, Jessica and Michael say that the Positive Peace Digital Academy is open to anybody, anytime, though, right?
Yes, so the online academy, I'll drop down the link. That's available to everyone globally. It's also available in 52 languages, which is something that we're really excited about. But the 3-session workshop, these will be held on Zoom, and specifically RPCVs will be invited.
One of the things that I did want to add, though, in terms of how it could potentially, help it in sort of the broader reach, is that in many ways we hope this can also act as kind of sort of a trainer of trainers, in the sense that any a returned Peace Corps volunteer would then have the tools and be positioned to be able to then either run a similar workshop, or at least to be able to sort of have a form of community assessment or a broader conversation with key actors or members in the community to find broader ways of building positive peace. So we'll definitely do our best to position you all to be able to have those conversations and lead those conversations on your own.
So I just dropped the link to the Positive Peace Academy. I know there were, Stephen, you had mentioned the strategic partnership with Rotary. We do also have a Rotary Positive Peace Academy. The modules, the 5 core modules are the same, except that there's one special module, which is about Rotary and Rotary areas of focus. So I'll drop both of those actually.
Could we maybe also add your email addresses, Michael and Jessica, if you don't mind sharing? For anyone that has further questions, I will also add mine to the chat here. Well, good timing. A couple of minutes from the top of the hour here. Maybe time for one more question, if there are any.
I don't want to take the last couple of minutes, because this is actually a question I wanted to ask Jessica and Michael about the research and your indices. You've been at it for 15 years. My question is, has anything changed in terms of how you measure peace, positive peace and peace in the world? I'm thinking in particular the growing emergence of social media in our societies. But are there any things that have changed over those 15 years in terms of how you measure peace around the world?
So, so the short answer is yes, and in fact there are generally changes every year, because that's kind of one of the advantages, but also one of the cruxes of doing this in a quantitative way. We're not sort of this isn't a philosophical framework. It's very much based on statistical analysis and the correlations that exist, right, between these measures of violence and then these deeper socioeconomic. So as, when, and if these correlations change, these things are kind of sort of generally adapted. Now, one of the elements about the 8 P's, the sort of the 8 pillars of positive peace, is that framework has held strong throughout, right? So even though we see these societal shifts, even though we ourselves change sometimes indicators based on the fact that there are new, and it's not that the indicators cease to have a value, it's the fact that as research becomes better and better, as research organizations are able to cover more countries, you then find research products or other indices that actually, basically collect a lot more data on this topic, right? And therefore the correlations become stronger. So annually, we have a more detailed and granular understanding about the elements related to positive peace. But we have found that these 8 buckets, these 8 pillars of positive peace, have stayed strong throughout, which I think, I hope, helps emphasize the actual sort of quantitative validity of this particular framework. It's interesting that you touch on social media, and that is actually something that we have seen through the data. One of the things that we've seen globally is this ongoing deterioration in what we call the attitudes domain. Now, there are elements to, press freedoms, and there are elements related to socioeconomic equalities in there, but social media the quality of information that people are currently having access to, we think is a driver, or at the very least, correlated with some of these deteriorations that we're seeing. So we're going to be reporting a lot more on that in the future.
Well, I am just thrilled to see where this goes. I want to thank our presenters today and looking forward to working with you both. I will be registering myself for the workshop in December. I can't wait. And I hope many of you will consider joining, signing up using the registration form that Jessica dropped in and that we'll also email around, and sharing with your RPCV friends and non-RPCV friends. I really look forward to getting this pilot going. Thanks to all who attended, and have a great weekend. I guess we can just close it here.
Thank you all. Take care.